The glove found in the field was believed to be very similar to the one linked to the Nancy Guthrie kidnapping. The DNA test results have come back, but there was no match in the Cody system, the FBI's database containing genetic profiles of approximately 57 million individuals, most of whom have prior criminal records. Clearly, this is a setback in the investigation. However, it's not the end of the road. Beyond direct database comparisons, DNA can still be analyzed through other methods, such as genetic genealogy, a technique many people have heard about in recent years. The man who abducted Nancy Guthrie covered his face, wore gloves, and disconnected the camera, seemingly taking careful steps to avoid leaving any trace behind. But the lingering question remains: were those precautions truly enough to erase every clue? He was careful, meticulous, even. He covered his tracks, concealed his identity, and tried to eliminate every visible trace. But there was one mistake he couldn't undo. He bought his gear at Walmart. And Walmart has cameras. Walmart keeps purchase records. Walmart has corporate security teams now working hand in hand with the FBI. Every single transaction, paid by card, by cash, in-store, or online, creates a footprint. And footprints can be followed. Tonight, the focus shifts. We trace the evidence step by step, from the doorbell footage investigators nearly lost, to the backpack, the holster, the mask, the gloves, each item of clothing, connected piece by piece to retail databases, surveillance systems, and investigative strategies that have solved cases just like this before. While the public has been absorbed by ransom notes and DNA reports, investigators have been quietly constructing something far more methodical. A purchase timeline, a documented trail, and perhaps even an identity, one no longer hidden behind a mask. On February 10th, the FBI released 4 black and white still images along with 2 short video clips recovered from the back-end servers of Nancy Guthrie's Nest doorbell camera. The suspect had attempted to destroy the device. He didn't succeed. The surviving footage has now become the cornerstone of an investigation involving more than 400 law enforcement personnel, all working to follow the trace he never realized he left behind. The footage captures a lone figure standing on Nancy Guthrie's front porch, a male, estimated to be between 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 10 inches, average build. He is dressed in a ski mask, a dark zip-up jacket, long pants, and gloves. A backpack rests on his shoulders, and a handgun secured in a holster sits near his waist. In one clip, he steps toward the front door and slowly lifts a gloved hand toward the camera before turning away. In another, he faces the lens directly, what appears to be a flashlight clenched in his mouth, before deliberately covering the camera with nearby vegetation. To the public, the most striking details were obvious: the mask, the weapon, the calculated movements. Those are the images that linger. But investigators were focused on something far less dramatic and far more revealing. They weren't studying his posture or his intimidation tactics. They were cataloging what he was wearing, not out of interest in style, but because every item on his body is a manufactured product. Every product comes from a company. Every company distributes through retailers. And every retailer keeps records. The first piece they isolated was the backpack, a black 25-liter Ozark trail hiker pack. It may look ordinary, even forgettable, but in an investigation like this, ordinary items can become the most important clues of all. Identifying the backpack changed everything. It didn't just add another detail to the case, it narrowed the field dramatically. The Ozark Trail brand is a private label manufactured exclusively for Walmart. It isn't stocked at Target. It isn't listed on Amazon. You won't find it in independent sporting goods stores, surplus shops, or specialty retailers. If someone owns an Ozark Trail product, it came from Walmart. There is no alternative source. That exclusivity creates a powerful investigative advantage. It means every single Ozark Trail hiker pack ever sold is logged inside Walmart's transaction system. Each purchase carries a timestamp. Each one is tied to a specific store location. And depending on the method of payment, some of those transactions may connect directly to an identifiable customer. Walmart has already provided investigators with purchase records, data covering every Ozark Trail hiker pack sold in recent months, not only in Tucson but in surrounding areas as well. In-store sales. Online orders. Every transaction. Now detectives are combing through that information methodically. How many were sold in the last 30 days? The last 60? Were any bought with traceable credit or debit cards? Were any purchased alongside clothing, gloves, or gear matching what appears in the footage? Piece by piece, they are searching for overlap, because somewhere in that database may be a transaction that doesn't just represent a backpack sale, but the moment the suspect unknowingly stepped into a digital trail he couldn't erase. And here's where the stakes rise even higher. Walmart's surveillance network is vast. Cameras positioned at entrances and exits, above every register, lining most aisles, and covering large sections of the parking lot. If the suspect walked into a Walmart store to purchase that backpack, there is a strong likelihood that his uncovered face was captured somewhere on that system. Not masked. Not hidden. Just another customer moving through the store. But the backpack may have been only part of the story. Investigators suspect the clothing, the jacket, the pants, the gloves, even the ski mask, could also have been purchased during that same visit. The working theory is simple and compelling. One trip to prepare, one store to supply everything, one sequence of surveillance footage documenting it all. Unlike the backpack, those clothing items are not exclusive to Walmart. A dark jacket or ski mask can be found at countless retailers. Detectives have been careful not to overstate that link. The Walmart connection for the clothing remains a possibility, not a confirmed fact. Still, the reasoning is difficult to ignore. If the backpack definitively traces back to Walmart, and the clothing matches items commonly sold there, the most logical conclusion is that the suspect outfitted himself in one place, in one transaction. And if that's true, then somewhere within that store's cameras and transaction logs may exist a complete picture, not of a masked intruder, but of a man preparing for a crime, unaware that the system he relied on for anonymity was quietly recording every step. If investigators can pinpoint the exact brands and models of the clothing seen in the footage, the next step becomes powerful: cross-referencing transactions. Imagine a single receipt showing the purchase of an Ozark Trail hiker pack, a specific model of ski mask, and a particular pair of black gloves, all bought together. The individual tied to that transaction would instantly move to the center of the investigation. Patterns like that don't get ignored. But here's where the case takes an even more intriguing turn. There is another detail in the footage that many viewers barely noticed, yet it could prove more revealing than the backpack itself: the holster. The suspect is wearing a handgun holster at his waist, and it has been identified as consistent with a low-cost model sold at select Walmart stores for around $10. It's a large-frame revolver hip holster, water-resistant, designed for right-hand use and built to fit revolvers with barrels between 4 and 6.5 inches. The problem? The firearm he appears to be carrying does not look like a revolver. Instead, it resembles a semi-automatic pistol, something similar to a Walther-style handgun. That mismatch is striking. A revolver holster paired with a semi-automatic pistol is not a combination an experienced firearm owner would typically choose. But it is exactly the kind of oversight someone might make if they walked into a Walmart, selected the cheapest holster available without understanding its intended design, and used it simply because it was accessible. And in investigations like this, small inconsistencies often speak the loudest. That single detail reveals two critical conclusions. First, this does not appear to be a seasoned professional. Analysts have already described the suspect's gun handling in the footage as awkward, even inexperienced. The holster only reinforces that assessment. It suggests someone who obtained a weapon and formed a plan, but lacked the technical knowledge to carry either out with precision. Second, and far more importantly, the inexpensive $10 holster is not a high-volume item like the backpack. While many customers may have purchased the Ozark Trail hiker pack, far fewer would have selected that specific revolver holster. If investigators can cross-reference buyers who purchased both the backpack and that exact holster at the same store, or within the same narrow time frame, the pool of possibilities shrinks dramatically. Instead of analyzing hundreds of transactions, they may be looking at only a handful, perhaps even fewer. At the same time, the FBI has been approaching the case from another direction. Agents have reportedly been visiting gun stores throughout the Tucson area, bringing still images from the doorbell footage and asking whether anyone recognizes the suspect, the firearm, or the holster. In one instance, a gun store owner stated publicly that agents presented him with a list of 18 to 24 names, complete with photographs, and asked him to compare those individuals against his sales records. 18 to 24 names. That number speaks volumes. Law enforcement does not walk into a store with a curated list like that unless a significant amount of filtering has already taken place. It suggests that, behind the scenes, investigators have quietly narrowed the field, building a focused roster of persons of interest long before the public realized how precise the search had become. Purchase histories, DNA results, public tips, surveillance footage. All of it has converged to generate those names. The visits to local gun stores are not random, they are strategic. They represent an effort to test and refine an already developing profile. Although the sheriff has publicly stated that the investigation has not been narrowed to a specific group, the account from the gun store owner suggests otherwise. Investigators have a list, and they are systematically running those names through every database and record available. The retail trail is not a side note, it is one of the central pipelines feeding that shortlist. Before moving further, however, there is a crucial technical detail that shapes how the evidence is being interpreted. The doorbell camera was operating in infrared mode, which is standard for Nest systems at night. Infrared dramatically alters how materials appear on video. Dark fabrics can register as lighter shades. Black clothing can look gray, or even pale, depending on how the material reflects infrared light. In the footage, the suspect's ski mask appears lighter than expected. Investigators have clarified that it is believed to be black. The variation in tone is likely caused by the fabric reflecting infrared light unevenly, not because the mask contains multiple colors. The same distortion applies to the holster. What appears to be a lighter or two-toned accessory on screen is most likely a single dark-colored item affected by infrared imaging. This distinction matters. Members of the public have been attempting to identify specific products based on the visible shades in the footage. But infrared can be deceptive. Without understanding how the technology alters color perception, it's easy to misidentify gear and potentially overlook the very details investigators are carefully analyzing behind the scenes. And many of the public's assumptions have been incorrect. Investigators are not relying on what the items appear to look like in the infrared footage. They are reconstructing each piece through the science of infrared imaging, analyzing how different materials reflect light at night, then reverse engineering those distortions to determine how the items would appear in natural daylight. From there, they work backward, matching those corrected characteristics to real-world products. That level of forensic reconstruction is far beyond what viewers at home can attempt. While online discussions focus on shades and shapes visible on screen, specialists are applying physics, material analysis, and comparative retail data to narrow the possibilities with precision. And then there is one more subtle detail, one that has received almost no public attention. The sheriff mentioned in an interview that the images may show the suspect wearing a ring beneath his glove. It is faint, but potentially visible. Forensic analysts are now enhancing and examining the footage to determine whether that detail is genuine. If confirmed, it could be significant. A ring is not like a jacket or a mask. Clothing can be discarded. Hairstyles can be changed. A person can relocate. But a ring, especially one worn daily, often becomes part of someone's identity. Friends notice it. Co-workers recognize it. Family members associate it with the person who wears it. If the suspect habitually wears a ring, that small, nearly overlooked detail could become one of the most personal and revealing clues in the entire investigation. A ring is not a small detail. Your co-workers notice it. The cashier at the gas station you visit every morning sees it when you hand over your card. It appears in family photos, in social media posts, in casual videos taken at birthdays and barbecues. It is remembered in the grip of a handshake. If investigators confirm that the suspect was wearing a distinctive ring beneath his glove, they gain something far more personal than a general description of height and build. They gain a specific, recognizable object. Something tangible they can show to every person who submits a tip. Not just, does this look like someone you know, But, have you seen this ring before? For anyone skeptical about whether following retail trails can truly solve a case, there is recent proof that it can. On December 4, 2025, the FBI arrested Brian Cole Jr. in connection with placing 2 pipe bombs outside the Republican and Democratic National Committee headquarters in Washington, D.C. The case had remained unsolved for nearly 5 years. Investigators had reviewed 39,000 video files, conducted more than 1,000 interviews, and processed over 600 tips without making an arrest. What ultimately broke the case was not a confession or a dramatic tip. It was purchase data. The FBI issued subpoenas to hardware stores and large retail chains for transactions involving the exact components used in the devices: galvanized pipes, threaded end caps, 9-volt batteries, kitchen timers, electrical wire. They traced 233,000 separate purchases of a single type of end cap. They even subpoenaed sneaker retailers after identifying the suspect's shoes through surveillance footage. The strategy was meticulous and data-driven. And it worked. Which is precisely why investigators in this case are paying such close attention to backpacks, holsters, clothing, and possibly even a ring. Because sometimes the trail that leads to an arrest is not hidden in dramatic evidence, but in ordinary purchases quietly recorded in a database. Investigators did not rely on a single source of evidence. They layered it. Purchase records were cross-referenced with cell phone tower data. That data was compared against license plate reader hits. Those hits were weighed alongside physical descriptions from surveillance footage. And at the point where all of those streams intersected, one name surfaced. Brian Cole Jr. He had purchased bomb components from retailers such as Home Depot and Walmart. His phone had pinged near the scene. His vehicle had been captured by automated plate readers. The information had existed inside FBI systems for years. It simply had not been connected. The similarities to the Guthrie investigation are striking. Again, there is surveillance footage. Again, there are identifiable retail products traced to specific stores. Again, purchase records are being subpoenaed and cross-checked against other data sources. The methodology is the same because it has already proven effective. The only real difference is timing. In the Cole case, it took nearly 5 years to assemble the full picture. In the Guthrie case, evidence is unfolding in real time. The pressing question is whether investigators can accelerate the process, whether they can connect the dots before years pass. But there is another dimension that complicates this case: DNA. And the reality is more nuanced than much of the public reporting suggests. There are at least 2 separate sets of unidentified DNA involved in this investigation, and they do not match each other. The first sample was recovered from a glove discovered roughly 2 meters from Nancy Guthrie's home, lying in a field near the roadside. The FBI has stated that the glove appears visually consistent with those worn by the suspect in the doorbell footage. That alone makes it significant. Yet the genetic profile obtained from it has not produced a confirmed match, and it does not align with the second unknown DNA sample in the case. 2 separate genetic signatures. One suspect on camera, and investigators working to determine whether these threads converge or point in entirely different directions. Laboratory testing of the glove recovered near the road produced a DNA profile from an unknown male. That profile was uploaded into CODIS, the FBI's national database containing more than 26 million genetic profiles. There was no match. A second, separate DNA sample was collected from Nancy Guthrie's property. It does not belong to Nancy. It does not belong to anyone known to have had close contact with her. And critically, it does not match the DNA recovered from the glove. 2 different locations. 2 unidentified male DNA profiles. No match to each other. No match to anyone in the system. There are several possible explanations, and none are straightforward. The glove, despite its visual similarity to the one seen in the footage, may not belong to the suspect at all. During the search, 16 gloves were collected from the surrounding area, most of them belonging to members of the search teams. The FBI has been careful to clarify that the connection between the recovered glove and the suspect is based on appearance, not on confirmed forensic linkage. As for the DNA found on the property, It could belong to someone entirely unrelated to the crime, a repair technician, a contractor, a delivery driver, or a visitor from weeks or even months earlier. Residential properties accumulate genetic material over time from countless routine interactions. There is also a more complex possibility that more than one individual was involved. Adding to that speculation is the wording used by the ransom tipster who contacted TMZ. The message referred to the main individual, not the kidnapper, not the person, but the main individual. That phrasing leaves open the possibility that there were others. At this stage, the DNA evidence does not provide clarity. It raises questions. And in an investigation already layered with surveillance footage, retail trails, and digital records, those unanswered questions may prove just as important as the answers. That wording, the main individual, carries weight. It suggests the possibility of others. If more than one person was involved, then the presence of two separate unknown male DNA profiles at two different locations no longer appears contradictory. It becomes consistent with a multi-person theory. The sheriff has indicated that the DNA recovered from inside the property may ultimately prove more important than the DNA found on the glove. According to his public comments, investigators believe they may already possess the suspect's genetic material from within the home itself. But that process is far from simple. Samples must be isolated, separated from background DNA, and subjected to further testing before any definitive conclusion can be reached. Meanwhile, the DNA from the glove is being prepared for investigative genetic genealogy. This is the same approach that led to the identification of Brian Kohberger in the Idaho college murders. The method involves uploading an unknown DNA profile into publicly accessible genealogy databases, searching for partial familial matches, and then building family trees backward until a likely individual emerges. It is meticulous work, but when successful, it can be transformative. However, there is a significant constraint. The three largest consumer DNA companies, 23andMe, MyHeritage, and Ancestry DNA, have collectively tested more than 50 million individuals, yet all three prohibit law enforcement from accessing their databases for investigative searches. That limitation forces investigators to rely on smaller, opt-in platforms such as GEDmatch, Family Tree DNA, and DNA Justice. Combined, those databases contain fewer than 2 million profiles. The technique remains powerful, but the search pool is dramatically smaller. And in a case where timing matters, that limitation could slow the process at a moment when every day counts. One of the nation's leading genetic genealogists stated publicly that, if she were in the Guthrie family's position, she would be urging the major consumer DNA companies to make an exception and allow access to their databases. Whether those companies will reconsider their policies remains uncertain. While the retail tracking and DNA analysis move forward, another effort, entirely technological in nature, is focused on a different objective: locating Nancy Guthrie herself. Beginning February 3rd, Parsons Corporation deployed its Bluefly technology to assist in the search. Bluefly is a compact Bluetooth and Wi-Fi detection sensor, weighing less than a pound, with an effective range of approximately 218 yards. It was first mounted to a sheriff's department helicopter and later deployed on ground vehicles and carried by personnel on foot, expanding the scope of the search area. The device's mission is highly specific: to scan for Bluetooth signals emitted by Nancy's pacemaker. Modern pacemakers transmit low-energy Bluetooth signals intended to sync with a nearby smartphone for monitoring. The disconnection of Nancy's pacemaker app from her phone at 2:28 a.m. does not indicate that the pacemaker itself stopped functioning. It simply means the connection to her phone was lost. If the pacemaker remains active, it may still be broadcasting a detectable signal, one that Bluefly was designed to find. In a case driven by data trails and digital footprints, even a faint wireless pulse could become the signal that changes everything. Pacemakers are engineered to operate independently. Even if disconnected from a phone, the device continues functioning on its own. If Nancy's pacemaker is still active and she is within detection range, Bluefly could, in theory, capture its signal. But the environment presents a serious obstacle. The Tucson desert is saturated with Bluetooth emissions, smart thermostats inside nearby homes, fitness trackers, wireless earbuds, vehicle systems, tracking tags. Each one sends out signals. Each one is detected. Investigators must methodically scan, categorize, and eliminate signal after signal, narrowing the field until either Nancy's pacemaker signature is identified or the search grid is exhausted. In response to those challenges, a cybersecurity specialist working alongside the CEO of the National Center for Open and Unsolved Cases has developed a prototype drone-mounted detection system specifically for this investigation. The device has been provided to the FBI and may soon be deployed. According to the expert, the pacemaker may be the most objective witness in the case. Unlike human testimony, it generates telemetry data independent of perception or memory. If that data can be accessed, it may not only indicate Nancy's location, but also establish a timeline of events after the doorbell camera went dark. Then, on February 15th, a source close to the investigation introduced a theory that dramatically reframed public understanding. Investigators now believe this may have been a burglary that spiraled out of control. Several independent experts who analyzed the doorbell footage reached similar conclusions. The suspect's movements, the choice of equipment, the apparent lack of coordination, all suggest improvisation rather than the precision of a carefully orchestrated kidnapping. If that assessment is accurate, it changes everything. A crime of opportunity carries different motives, different risks, and potentially different mistakes. And in a case built on small details and overlooked traces, mistakes may be the very thing that ultimately leads investigators to the truth.